Good afternoon. Today we will be factoring trinomials. We'll be factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. Here are some things to remember before we begin. When you multiply two binomials together using FOIL, the last term of the trinomial is the product of the last term of each binomial. Looking at the example that I provided, x plus 3 times x plus 4, 12 is the last term of the trinomial. It's the product of 3 times 4. The coefficient of the middle term is the sum of the last term of each binomial. So the coefficient of the middle term here is 7, and we have 4 plus 3 equals 7. We're going to use this information as we factor trinomials. So once again, after we use FOIL to multiply x plus 4 times x plus 3, we know the last term is the product of 4 and 3, and the middle term is the sum of 4 and 3. Let's look at the trinomial x squared plus 6x plus 5. This is like a game that you can play where you're looking for the product and the sum. The product of 5, we want two numbers whose product is 5 and whose sum is 6. What two numbers do you know whose product is 5 and whose sum is 6? Well, I know that 1 times 5 is 5, and I know that 1 plus 5 is 6. Therefore, I know that I can factor this trinomial into the two binomials, x plus 1 times x plus 5. To check my work, I can use FOIL. I can multiply my first two terms together. X times x is x squared. My outside term is 5x. My inside term is 1x. So my middle term becomes 1x plus 5x, which is 6x. And my last term for the trinomial is 1 times 5, which is 5. And I have the same answer as my trinomial that I factored, x squared plus 6x plus 5. Let's look at x squared plus 6x plus 9, excuse me. Again, I'm looking for two numbers whose product is 9 and whose sum is 6. What two numbers do you know whose product is 9 and whose sum is 6? I know that 3 times 3 is 9 and 3 plus 3 is 6. That tells me when I factor this trinomial, I will factor it into the two binomials, x plus 3 times x plus 3. Now, if you'll notice, this is a square. This is a perfect square, so we can write this as x plus 3, the quantity squared, and we have a perfect square binomial. Again, we can check our answer by using FOIL. This is a special product again, so this is x squared plus 3x plus 3x, so that's plus 6x, and my last term is 3 times 3, or 9. Let's do one more example of this type. X squared minus 8x plus 15. This time my middle term is negative, but I can still look for the product and the sum. I'm looking for the product of two numbers whose product is 15 and whose sum is negative 8. If my last term is positive, giving me a positive 15, and my middle term is negative, or negative 8, I know that my two numbers must both be negative. So I'm thinking of two numbers who are both negative to give me a product of positive 15 and a sum of negative 8. I'm thinking negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15, and negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. Therefore, my factored form of this trinomial is x minus 3 times x minus 5. Again, I can check it using FOIL. I have my first two terms are x squared. Outside is negative 5x. Inside is negative 3x. And my last is -5 times -3, which is +15. My middle two terms, when added together, are -8x, and I have x squared minus 8x plus 15. I have factored correctly. Now, the next example, our middle term will be positive, and our last term will be negative. So this time, when we're thinking of product and sum, we know one of the numbers will be positive and one will be negative because my product will be negative. So I'm thinking of two numbers whose product is -20 and whose sum is 1. So my two factors must be, the absolute value must be 1 apart if the sum is 1. So I'm thinking of -4 times 5 gives me a product of -20, and -4 plus 5 gives me a sum of 1. Therefore, my factored form is x minus 4 times x plus 5. Now check this. Let's use FOIL. So we have x times x is x squared. Our outside term is x times 5, which is positive 5x. Our inside term is -4 times x, which is minus 4x. And our last terms are -4 times 5, which is -20. Combining my left terms in the middle, I get x squared plus x minus 20, and it checks. One more example. We have x squared minus 3x minus 18. So we're looking for a product of -18 and the sum of -3. So my two factors, again, one must be positive and one must be negative. This time, however, the larger factor must be negative if the sum is negative. So what two numbers, when I multiply them together, give me a product of -18? I know that -6 times +3 equals -18, and that does give me a bigger, my negative factor is bigger, the absolute value is bigger. So then I'm going to add them, and I get -6 plus 3, and my sum is -3. So my factor form is x minus 6 times x plus 3. Again, I'll check this by using FOIL with practice. X times x is x squared. 3 times x is 3x. -6 times x is -6x. And 3 times -6 is -18. Giving me a final answer of x squared minus 3x minus 18. This does check. That's all we're going to be learning for today. Notice we do not have a coefficient in front of our x squared term, so that's something we'll be learning later on. For today, all your problems will fit into this nice category of two factors giving you a product and two sums giving you that middle term. Thank you.